Okay, just 30 seconds and then we'll kick off. We're just waiting for a few more. Please make sure you keep yourselves on mute. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to put your questions in the chat box. If you want to speak on the microphone, no worries, just use the reactions and put your hand up and we'll let you speak. You can keep your cameras on or you can keep them off, there's no problem. This session will be recorded, so just let everybody know who can't attend tonight. Okay, so we're going to start off now. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our fourth session for the Pupillage interviews, the series. Today we'll be covering immigration law, and we've got three amazing barristers from 33 Bedford Row Chambers, and we are very grateful and happy to be here tonight. So my name is Sarah Al-Casey. I am one of the hosts of this event. Me, Colombo and Benedict usually organize these events, and we thank you all for supporting and attending these events. So I'm going to pass it on to Chili to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, thanks for attending and thanks to our panelists for coming. And my name is Chelvan. I'm a bar student at Nottingham Trent University. Benedict.
Hiya, my name is Benedict. I'm also a bar student at the University of Law, studying the BPC. Hope everyone's all right, and I'm really excited for tonight.
Thank you. I forgot to mention I'm also a barrister student, of course. So I want to say a special thank you to our panelists. They have been so supportive, so friendly, and so kind, approachable as well. So they're going to introduce themselves now. So we're going to start off with Dr. Chelvan.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thanks to Sarah, Colombo, and Benedict for the kind invitation. My name's Chelvan. I'm a barrister at 33 Bedford Row Chambers, where I'm head of the immigration and public law team with some great teammates here tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. Baldip, would you like to go next and introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. I'm Baldip Singh. I'm also a barrister at 33 Bedford Row. I practice family and immigration law. Rehana.
Hello, well, my name's Rehana Popal. I'm a barrister at 33 Bedford Row. I practice public law, immigration and civil.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. So before we start off with the questions, because we've had a lot of questions coming in and we've prepared some questions for the attendees, we want to find out more about each of the barristers' journey and how they've reached where they are right now. So we're going to start off with Baldip. Just tell us your journey to the bar and how it has been, please.
Sure. Well, I was the firstborn to go to university. I come from first and second generation immigrant parents. My dad worked in a bakery. My mum continues to work in a factory, something she enjoys, and I have no say in the matter. So I was the first to go to university. Came from a family that didn't actually know what a barrister was, what law was really. I managed to sell it to my mum by saying that I was going to go on to become a doctor. And actually PhD is something on my to-do list. And I went on to study at Birmingham University, where I read a law degree. In my second year, I applied for scholarship in a temple. One of my lecturers, she was so supportive. She was a barrister and a part-time lecturer at my university. Having seen me in moots, really encouraged me to apply to the bar, something I didn't even know existed until I'd been to court with her. I went on to apply for scholarship. I was an Inner Temple major scholar. Without their funding, I would never have been able to complete the BPTC as it then was. So I went on to study the BPTC at the College of Law, again, as it then was. I was asked in reference to my pupillage. I had undertaken a specialist administrative law pupillage at 2 King's Bench Walk, London. the Chambers of Cadre QC, and it was amazing. It was very specific training in respect of the kind of advocacy that's required in administrative law, very submissions-based appellate work, and some really interesting cases. The day in the life of a barrister, as a pupil barrister, the first 6 months would consist of me going to court with Mr. Kadri, taking notes of his hearings, looking through drafts of his grounds of appeal, judicial review grounds, skeleton arguments, preparing bundles, particularly authorities bundles. And then in second 6, when you're on your feet, it was a small set, so we had a lot of really interesting, juicy work, and a lot of my practice was upper tribunal and the High Court, because there's still a lot of judicial reviews being heard in the administrative court then. So that's my journey in terms of pupillage. I then went on straight after pupillage. I was approached by 33 Bedford Row. They were setting up an immigration team at that stage and really wanted me to come on board. And it was a bigger set, and it was a mixed common law set. So we do crime, family, immigration, and civil, and now various other areas as well that are fall under those umbrellas. So I joined 33 Bedford Row, which is where I've been ever since. I was asked what sort of difficulties that I see that affect pupils now. I think the bar's changed a lot over the years, even from when I was a pupil. And in respect to that, I'd say getting work in for pupils and understanding how a chambers works is really important. And I think pupils don't fully grapple with that or fully understand how a chambers work. A chambers is a business. So those days that you may have seen in Silk or other TV dramas of clerks going out to get work in for you, that's changed a lot. You're in charge of your own practice and developing it. So building links with solicitors is really important. And building your practice is really important. And I think that's a difficulty that pupils come into this profession not fully understanding. What made me want to do immigration work? Well, I knew I wanted to work for my community. I knew that I wanted to be their voice. Firstly, as a translator, a lot of the work I'd done before coming to the bar, even at GCSE A-level stage, was reading letters for the elderly at the Gurdwara that didn't understand letters. They didn't understand what the letters was asking of them. So just translating those, telling them where to sign, writing the address on envelopes, things like that. And I just felt that if I didn't assist my community, it would get left behind. And that was something I was really passionate about. So I knew I wanted to be their voice, not just as a translator, but for their rights as well. I noticed the more I worked with my community, the more issues that remained untackled and were still very backwards in their thinking, particularly domestic violence, for example, and what constitutes domestic violence, and immigration issues, not understanding what the law was, bad legal advice, following wrong legal advice. There was a lot of that going on. So that's where my passion for law really got fueled, to be that voice of the vulnerable. So although it wasn't specifically immigration that I wanted to deal with, it was very much areas that affect my community, which fueled my passion and drive to go on to become a barrister. And now my practice is quite a niche area. I don't do solely immigration and I don't do solely family. I do this in between lacuna where it overlaps. So I draft a lot of opinions in family care cases in respect of immigration issues, and similarly vice versa, the effect of family court proceedings in the immigration courts. So that's really the area I now specialise in. I think that covers my journey to where I am now, and then I think I'll pass over back to you, Sarah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Baldip. That was perfect. And you've covered all the points that we wanted to cover to your journey to the bar. So that's great. Thank you. So we're going to move on to Rehana. So if you just please tell us your journey to the bar. Why did you want to become a barrister, and how was it?
I've unmuted myself. Didn't make that traditional faux pas. So the reason why I'll tell the story about how, well, the day that I decided to become a barrister, I'd come home from school. It was in year 6, and my brother was watching television. And I turned to him, I said, "Who are those people who wear a wig and stand in court and talk?" It was on some TV show, and he went, "Oh, they're called barristers." I said, "Okay, that's what I'm going to do." I then went off on a post-it note and wrote my entire life plan. I said, I'm going to study politics, then I'm going to do a law conversion, then I'm going to study the bar course, and then I'm going to be a human rights barrister, full stop. And that's what I did. So I think I was 10, 11. And from that point onwards, every single goal that I had was always with the bar in mind. So years ago, during year 10, you would do a work experience. And I picked up work experience at Highbury Magistrates Court. And then I kept in touch, and I'd always just go to Highbury Magistrates Court and just sit at the back for no apparent reason. I'd just watch. And I kept in touch with the clerks. So at one point, I got a summer kind of internship just to cover whilst a lot of people are wearing annual leave and they needed summer cover. So I did that for a few weeks. And that's when I learned the power of the clerk. Be nice to a court clerk. That's my top tip later on when we come to it for future pupils. The clerks control your destiny to a big extent when you're in court. Be nice to them and take them on side, because I can certainly say solicitors who pissed me off would go to the bottom of the list, and that was a very known thing that court clerks would do. So that was the reason why I wanted to become a barrister, from watching a TV show and just deciding, for no apparent reason but that. But as I subsequently went on, I was very fortunate to acquire a Mini at 9 kBW. And it was with this brilliant barrister, and there was a brilliant barrister called Mr. Jafar. And it was during that Mini, and it was an immigration case that he was covering at Hatton Cross Tribunal Centre, which is one of the 2 main tribunal centres in London. And it was about a young girl who was trafficked into the UK as a sex slave from Rwanda at the time of the genocide. And it was the most heartbreaking case. And I remember some of the questions that were put to her in cross-examination was, oh, in your first interview, you said you were held in a hut. And then in your second interview, you said a tent. This is an inconsistency. And I just couldn't believe it. I was thinking, she was a 9-year-old who was abused severely and is now trafficked. And you're asking about the pronouncement between hut and tent when she was using an interpreter. Like, it didn't make any sense to me. And she was, at that point, she'd been in a foster family, been taken care of, and they wanted her to stay. But the Home Office was saying, well, there's no more genocide in Rwanda. You can now go back. Yes, we accept your family were all murdered in front of you. And we accept all this terrible stuff has happened, but it doesn't matter now. You can now just go back. And I think it was that case that really stuck with me going forward, that then kind of made me like reaffirm my kind of earlier life choices of like human rights, immigration. And I think the kind of link that I personally have with human rights and immigration is I'm a child refugee. My family came here as refugees from Afghanistan. I'm first generation. I went to a state comp. I'm dyslexic. I went to not a very good secondary school, was in special measures, and was constantly in trouble. So my background itself was always non-traditional, and it's that kind of link to the community and I remember like translating documents for my mother and looking over paperwork, and even as a child, just all of those kind of responsibilities. And I think that's why I had this link with immigration and human rights in the bar. But it was that mini pupillage that really, for me, just was like, right, I want to, this is what I want to do. I was incredibly lucky. I was awarded a major scholarship by Inner Temple, which covered everything, the fees, the dining sessions, online joining. But for that scholarship, I could say with great sense, I probably would not be here today, because my family did not come from the kind of money to be able to afford that level of fees. And I was very hesitant to take out a bank loan to make that investment because of the lack of certainty with getting pupillage and how hard it is. So I think the thing that massively turned the tide for me was a scholarship. I applied for pupillage only twice. Once was during the BPTC year when you're studying, and those applications, I admit, were abysmal. They were right slap bang in the middle between your crim lit, your criminal exam and the civil bar exam. It's slap bang in the middle is when those applications were due. It's the most stupid timing ever. And I half-assed them, I put something in, whatever. I got a couple of interviews, shockingly, but no offers, and I was put onto a reserve list. The following year, I was left from the bar very broken. I don't know why, I was just disenchanted with the whole thing. So I decided not to apply. And then that year, I was then headhunted by a firm called Lee Day. It's a big human rights firm. And I was asked to work on their Afghan cases, including the Iraq and the Afghan cases with the British Army potentially committing human rights abuses. And I worked on those cases, and it was during that time I thought, right, I'm going to do it once, and I'm going to do it properly for the first time. I'm going to sit down. And I did an Excel sheet. I researched the hell out of my chambers. I put down timelines. I organized my applications. I was on Gateway every day looking at, and I cached the website so you can go back and look at all the historical ones. So I could get a sense of idea of what is likely to be the criteria. And I researched it, and it took me months. I worked on my cover letter for about 5 months straight. My applications were about 6 or 7. But that was the plan. I was like, this time I'm going to do it properly. And if I get it this time, I'm great. If I don't, I'm walking away. And funnily enough, I applied to one set, and it was the very first application. It was out of Gateway. And Gateway was due to come in a few weeks' time. So I thought, oh, great, it's an out of Gateway application. Let me go through. I applied, shortlisted for an interview. I was like, wow, mini miracle, great. Next thing I know, go for the first round interview. I'm like, no way, they're not interested in me. Get a call. Okay, actually, you're invited for a second round interview. The second round interview was an all-day interview. So in the morning, you shadow counsel, you go to court, and in the afternoon, you sit in the Chambers common room for the entire day. Your CV has been distributed to every member of Chambers, and people will just drop in and keep asking you questions and talking to you. So it's a very intense all-day interview. And again, I walked out thinking, way out of my league, no way am I going to get it. Lo and behold, a week later, I then get a call and they're saying, we offer you pupillage. I was like, amazing. My first interview that I did of the year, my first application, by the time between my second interview, my first and second interview, pupillage applications on Gateway had gone in. I was then left in a predicament because all of the sets I'd applied to had invited me for an interview, including some of my dream sets, if I can call them that. And I was left with a very difficult predicament about what to do. Do I continue interviewing, knowing that I've got pupillage in the background, or do you walk away? And I was given some very sound advice from very senior members of the bar. And the saying that was constantly used was 2 hands, or a bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. Plus, the bar is a small world. You build a reputation, people will know. And there is nothing stopping that first set from saying, you know what, if you're going to be that way, we're going to withdraw our offer. So I took great satisfaction in writing to these chambers saying, thank you very much. I don't need your interview because I've got pupillage in a very polite way. And so that was kind of my journey. I think the biggest obstacle was always going to be financial. I was able to overcome that again through the grace of Inner Temple. As a pupil, as a junior, I think the challenges that you're going to expect is there is nothing as hard as pupillage, and not even bar school. Bar school was tough, but pupillage was so much harder. And nothing that I had done, whether or not it was working in the Court of Appeal as a paralegal or working on these intense, huge litigations, nothing prepared me for pupillage. It is intense. And I think for me, that I found most challenging was the sleep deprivation and how fast paced everything is, which you just got to learn. And I think my senior clerks once said to me, she goes, "You're going to be a swan. You're going to be paddling like crazy underneath, but looking elegant on front." And that's you as a pupil. You're looking like you're holding it down, but actually inside you're panicking and you're pedaling like crazy. The difficulties that I see right now, particularly pandemic for pupils, is that connection. I was very lucky where I could go to court and I'm sitting on the foyer discussing something with some random stranger, and he turns out to be a solicitor and he's watched me in the back of court and he goes, "Actually, I've got a case coming up, I'd like to brief you." That those interactions that you have, serendipity, just don't occur now with the pandemic, with people being on CVP, that connections that you have. And I think that's one of the biggest difficulties that I certainly envision now for those who are pupils and going forward, because I think virtual hearings are here to stay. And this is going to be part of the future. If not, it's not always going to be entirely like this, but it's going to be a big part of it. And that's one of the big drawbacks. And so it will require pupils to find different ways of building up that human connection with other members of chambers or solicitors, or making and building those connections. Imposter syndrome, yeah, absolutely. I think I still have it. There are days where I sit down and be like, what the hell am I doing here? Somebody's going to figure out I'm not meant to be here, or somebody's going to call up the BSB, and I don't know, not that I've done anything, but I just panic all the time. I think it just comes with the territory. It's totally irrational. Yeah, that's just, yeah, it doesn't go away, is the only thing that I've got to say. And sometimes you have these wins against absolute giants at the bar, and then you sit there and think, oh, actually, I do know what I'm talking about. Actually, that was half decent. And then you have these little moments where you're filled with self-confidence, and then there's other times when you get torn down to pieces, and it's just hard, and you've got to build yourself back up again, but it happens. I think I've answered all the questions. Unless I haven't answered anything, I'm going to leave it there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You've actually touched upon very important points, and we'll get onto that in a bit in more details. You've touched on the sponsorship, so we want to talk about that. I think a lot of students are unaware of the ends of court sponsorships, and there's a lot of things as well. You mentioned, I wrote it down actually. Oh, the translation for the elderly. I think Baldip mentioned it, and you mentioned it as well. I think the reasons why we all want to be barristers because our parents told us to translate all these legal documents for them when we were young. So thank you. So we'll get onto these points later on. Now we'll move on to our last panelist, but not least. So Dr. S. Chelvan, please introduce yourself.
Well, Sarah, thank you once again. It's amazing. You know, we've got a wonderful 2-hour session, and barristers love the sound of our own voice. So and we're storytellers, so you know we could be here all night. But I'll try and, you know, at the age of 46, which makes me clearly one of the eldest people on this Zoom call today, I'm just going to try and condense my life into hopefully a few minutes. To understand my journey to the bar, you need to understand who I am and how I identify. So I'm queer, I'm a person of colour, I'm a first-generation immigrant, I live with a disability, I'm non-Oxbridge, mainly Harvard doesn't count, we'll talk about Harvard in a moment, predominantly state school, and I'm living my dream. I think one of the things which we want to share, which you're already hearing from Rehana and Baldip, is that working at the immigration bar is life-changing and life-saving. We're given that gift to be, you know, my USP, and we're going to talk about that unique selling point, because when you're in an interview, you need to be able to identify your unique selling point. And for me, when I was going through pupillage as a black gay man with a hearing difficulty, I understand the issues surrounding civil liberties. If you ask me now, for the past 20 years, I've been using the fact that, you know, I'm the mouthpiece for those who know the words but have no voice. And it's very important when you're looking at what drives you, what's your passion, where does a fire in your belly come from, to be able to sit down and try and identify as best you can what makes you get out of bed on a Monday morning. what drives you to do the work you do. So my life in a few moments. Well, this is not clearly a suntan. I am a first generation migrant, just like Rehana, a pseudo refugee, because what happened was I was born in Sri Lanka in 1974, 77, 78, there were anti-Tamil riots in Sri Lanka. My mother was already in the UK as an anaesthetist doing her postgrad qualifications. So my father and mother decided it would not be safe to bring up 2 young Tamil boys in Sri Lanka, and we were able to piggyback onto her visa. So immigration has really been part of my physical and emotional journey, part of my identity. So my parents didn't know anything about refugee status, but they were in fact refugees. But because of my mother's visa status, we were able to stay here. The issue of difference, the politics of difference, what drives us to, I love the philosopher Iris Marion Young, who talks about in her book, The Politics of Difference, about the fact that those of us who come from these communities are driven to be our activists. We're going to talk about activist lawyers. I think I love being called, I self-identify as an activist lawyer, and it's great to be part of a chambers where we do totally believe and commit in our daily work is in relation to access to justice for all, irrespective of ability to pay, and that's really, really important. So for me, the issue of difference as a person of colour who grew up in Sussex, where mainly the majority of people were not with a lovely shade of brown or black skin. So, but we were always taught, my brother and I, to be proud of our difference, to celebrate our difference. And then it's lovely to hear Rehana and her experience of Highfield Magistrates Court and her watching TV, because I was expected to go to medicine. My mother was a doctor, I was the eldest son, Tamil boy, go to university, go to med school, qualify as a doctor, marry a nice Tamil girl, and have the kids, etc., etc. And at 14, for work experience, I don't know, year 9, year whatever, I'm sorry, I'm of the other generation, we had a work experience, and the work experience, because I was at school in Worthing, was a week at Worthing Magistrates Court. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. My mother said, look, do something different. You've done all this medicine. And I remember coming home, telling my parents, look, I want to be a barrister, not a doctor. And both my parents, like, chins went down to the ground, and my mother sort of tried to convince me that I could become a doctor and then barrister. My career as a teacher, you're mad, but there we are. But 14 was also a very important year for me, because I realized I was different in another way, that due my teenage development, my puberty, I realized that I was attracted to people of the same sex. And that was also another life-changing moment. People who know me know I'm obsessed with dates. I remember dates. I think in footnotes. So, 22nd of April, 1989, thanks to Derek Jarman, the prolific director, and Sebastian, I realized I like people of my own sex. So that was a very life-changing moment as well, because I realized I was living this story, living this life, living this double life. Fast forward a couple of years, I'm now at University of Southampton, where I did my undergraduate. I started doing civil engineering. A very good lesbian friend said, Chelvan, you're not a civil engineer, you should go into politics and law. So I ended up going to politics and law, loved it there. But then it was difficult to carry on living this lie. So when I was 21, it was actually my 25th anniversary on the 31st of May this year. I don't know how I'm going to celebrate or commemorate. So on the 31st of May, 1996, my mother said, Chelvan, are you gay? If you are, don't worry, I'll continue to love and support you. So I told her, and the following day I woke up and she gave me an ultimatum: either stop having sex for the next 5 years, or get you married off to a girl, or you have to leave the house. And my friends used to joke, like, you not having sex for 5 minutes, let alone 5 years, but that was an irony, because the point is I'd stopped living the lie. And for me, the only option was to be kicked out of home, to be rejected by the family. I had nothing. My things were sent to my university halls residence in 18 cardboard boxes and 19 dustbin bags, and a letter from my mother's solicitor saying that I had been disowned and disinherited from the family until I recounted my behaviour and practices. But Armistead Morgan says that we have 2 families, our biological family and our logical family. And I was very lucky to have my logical family, and Southampton really believed in me. So whenever I felt down, a very good politics lecturer of mine said, Chelvan, you've got so much more to give. It's about public service. My whole family's all been about public service, so hence why the bar was a natural home. And they believed very much in what I did. And I had no money. I had to go to the Access Fund to get money to pay my rent. I had to do various jobs. But because I was driven, I knew that I wanted to be, if you want to change the world, you want to be part of that change. And this is the mid-90s, when there was no equal age of consent. The age of consent when I started Southampton was 21. Every time I had sex with a man, I was committing a crime. It was only reduced to 18 a year after I went, and even then, that's an unequal age of consent. There were ban on openly lesbian and gay people serving in the armed forces, no anti-discrimination legislation, no civil partnership, let alone same-sex marriage. So we were definitely the third-class citizens with my colour and my sexual identity. So, quelle surprise, I was pretty much a student activist. I used to go and ban the armed forces, question the funding of the engineering faculty because they were getting money from the armed forces. So I was pretty out there and with it. I founded the Intercourt Society. You know, when you're at university, you know, those who are listening here at university, look at those leadership and teamwork skills. Look at those advocacy skills. Actually, today marks the 25th anniversary of me appearing on Chris Evans' TFI Friday, which was a TV show in the 90s where I did the bar debate. So try and pick up an unusual asset of your interpersonal skills to enable you to jump from the paper. So I graduated with a first, top in my year with 70 students. So, you know, if you're at university and you're going to your last exams, cram down and get that first. Because the statistics are there. 33% of those who get pupillage have got first-class degrees. You know, you're looking at access points in relation to that. Because the bar is very much an academic study and course and vocation. But I also got as we're lovely major scholars from Inner Temple Unite. You know, Rehana, Baldip and I were all major scholars, and the scholarship then in 1998 was 10,000, which covered all my bar fees. And I know for certain that if it wasn't for my inn, I would have had great difficulty. Would it have stopped me going to the bar and stopped me having more debt? No, because for me, I'd already had debt. And those were the days when there were no fees for going to university. So for me, it was always already part of my everyday living. But I knew that I was thirsty to go to the bar. So I got a major scholarship from Inner Temple. It was also the inn which had Martin Bowley, who's the president of Bar, Lesbian and Gay Group. I got the 95-96 handbook on my shelf here in my study. And it said, you know, you can be who you want to be. The bar is about a meritocracy. It's about attracting talent to ensure that the best people are there as the advocates for the most vulnerable in our society. I went to the Inns of Court School of Law. That was, I think, the first year or second year where College of Law and BPP had just opened. I had a lovely year at Bar School, you can imagine. I had my paid scholarship. I was a young gay man in London. There were only 3 days a week of having to go to lectures. That's all I need to say. At this level, it's before the watershed, but it was a lot of fun. I even dyed my hair blonde during my year at Bar School. Now, I hear a lot about how difficult it is to get pupillage interviews, let alone pupillage. So I'm going to share part of my story, and I want to try and use that to really spur on people to say, like, remember what I said to you about my story. I had no access points. When I applied for pupillage, there's something called PATCH, Pupillage Application Clearinghouse, and you could only apply to 12 sets of chambers. There were sets of chambers outside. So 12 sets in PATCH I applied for and 1 outside PATCH. I got interviewed by 12 out of my 13 sets. I got in the last rounds of 7, and I got 4 offers of pupillage in my first year of applying for pupillage. Why? Because I was driven. I was driven, I was thirsty, I'd evidence-based everything. For me, it wasn't just an academic study. This was my life. This is my calling. So all of you who are looking at your pupillage applications, doing interviews, so that's my dog Veritas, who Latin for truth, who's barking. It's all very Freudian. So I've got another dog called Nomos, who's Greek for law or convention. So I got the offers for pupillage. I got 4 offers for pupillage, and I selected Doughty Street for my first 6 and 2 Garden Court for my second 6. Some of the top, and I knew I wanted to do specialist tests. I knew I wanted to do immigration. I knew I wanted to do employment discrimination, and I was very lucky to do that. I know from people who saw me, and we can talk about interview tips in a moment, that I ranked top of my year for pupillage applicants for Garden Court, because I was told that by somebody on my interview. So you can do it. I'm not white, male and stale and heterosexual. Yeah, so you can do it. You've got to be thirsty to do it. So I started my second 6 at first 6 at Doughty Street. And then what happened was a friend of mine who just come back from Harvard Law School said, you know, Cambridge first and everything. Okay, apologize. Friend of mine said, well, why don't you apply for Harvard? I said, look, me, somebody, and this was in Bar School. And there's something called the Kennedy Memorial Trust Scholarship, which is basically the UK equivalent of the Rhodes, which paid for the year at Harvard. So I applied for the scholarship. I went to the interview, and Lady Arden was then a High Court judge and had just finished her place at the Law Commission. I had Mervyn King as a deputy head of the Bank of England, and I was just a Southampton graduate, and I just got spooked out. I had interview fright, yeah, for the first time in my life. So I didn't get the Kennedy Scholarship, but I got the place at Harvard. So I deferred a year, started my first 6 at Dowd Street, applied again, and then I got the scholarship to Harvard, which is the Kennedy Memorial Trust, which was life-changing to me. So I had to get permission from the Bar Council to split my pupillage, first 6 at Dowd Street, then the first 3 months at 2 Garland Court, then go to America for a year, and then come back and finish off my pupillage and carry on. So I started my first 3 months at 2 Garland Court, doing an immigration specialist. That was amazing. Then I took the year off. I ended up spending 4 weeks in Chicago doing a visiting research fellowship at Northwestern University. And that has got connected with the second date I had in Chicago, but that's another story. And then I did my master's at Harvard, specializing in international human rights law and the lesbian gay liberation movement. Remember, I had no money, but there are scholarships and funding available. And I'd recommend that those people who don't have masters, who are thinking about academic study, get the masters. You know, it really does help provide a second string to your bow in relation to your marketability and commitment to the academic side of the profession. Very quiet, sorry, I apologize. I'm having these interludes because of my lovely, gorgeous dog who's waiting for my husband to come home, which is slightly late. You'll hear a barrage of barks in a few moments. So I had the most amazing year at Harvard, and it is life-changing. Harvard, you know, English legal education says A plus B equals C. Harvard says you want to go to the letter, let's say Q. Harvard says invent the formula. And that's how I've approached my practice since Harvard. It's about inventing the formula, being that leader for change in the law. And that's what my whole professional life is about. It's about changing the law. None of us who are here on this seminar are happy with the state of the law. We're all here to change the law. We're not here to apply the law. We're here to change the law. We're all activist lawyers. So I came back from Harvard, had the most amazing year there. Came back, finished off my second stage, did squatting at 2 Garland Court, then started pupillage at Mitre House Chambers, which is a small little civil liberties human rights set from April 2002. I have a daughter, I know one of, I think Benedicta is in Nottingham. Yeah, I've got a door tenancy at Trent Chambers in Nottingham since 2002. But then I got tenancy at Mitre House from April 2002. That's where I really established my practice. Nobody really was doing LGBTQ asylum at that point. And that was my calling. So I started developing cases, getting reported cases in the tribunal from 2003. I mean, that's the key skill of a barrister to market, getting reported cases, getting cases which are read by other barristers, yeah? So I went to Mitre House, did all that, got into Chambers and Partners Legal 500 from 2006. So that's great to have the peer review. Still started to do my policy work as well as my academic work. So I got the first from Southampton, got the master's from Harvard, got the visiting research fellowship. And then 2007, I went to a conference and the chair of the panel was a PhD student. And she had just written about a case which I did in the Court of Appeal the year before. And that was my first case in the Court of Appeal. I thought, wait a minute here, I know a bit more about this case than you do. And I thought, well, I've got to do a PhD. So after a few years of practice, I thought, well, I've now got to do a PhD. So I convinced my husband to allow me to do oh, by the way, yes, another pupillage sort of word of advice, marriage guidance here. But if you don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend or non-binary gender fluid significant other by the time of pupillage, get one. Because if they survive pupillage, they survive life. My husband and I have been together 20 years in October, and we met when I was doing my pupillage, yeah? So really, it's really, and also preferably a non-lawyer, I find. It really helps to have a sort of balance in the home. So yeah, so I knew Robert Wintermuth at King's College London and went to a talk after going to Australia on a friend's wedding, convinced my husband to allow me to do this part-time PhD. I said, look, what do you think about being my my PhD supervisor? He said, yeah. So I started a PhD at King's in 2008. And then went from Mitre House, because I know about time, as I said, barristers love the sound of their own voice, went from Mitre House to Number 5, where I was headhunted by Magic Gill QC to join their team from January 2011. And then I was asked to join the lovely 33 Bedford Row end of last November. My former clerk, Mark Byrne, who was at number 5. And it's, you know, I can honestly say, I apologize if Baldip and Rehana have to blush here for this, but it is, you know, it's an amazing, I mean, when you go onto the website for 33, diversity is not a word, it's a fact of life. You know, we are a truly diverse set, and it's wonderful being such a, you know, heading a team of such raw talent and energy and passion for law. Is you know, and as I say, you know, the barrister's role is twofold: the storyteller, to tell the story of our clients, and to be the interpreter. Now, I'm not a linguist, unlike Baldip and Rehana and Sarah. You know, I lost my languages. I was trilingual when I came to the country. It was the 70s. Nurse school teachers didn't understand Tamil or Sinhala. I'm being a Tamil, so my parents stopped speaking to us in any language but English. But we're interpreters because we're interpreting the stories of our clients in that foreign language of the law. So I am really living my dream, you know, and it's about believing in yourself. You know, I always tell people who, what are the keys to that? You know, it's about, you know, live life with integrity, hold your head up high and listen to your heart. And that's the key skills in being able to achieve your dreams. So that's my journey to the bar.
That was wonderful. Honestly, I've had literally a roller coaster of emotions listening to you. That was fantastic. You're a role model, I must say. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, Doctor. So what we're going to do now, we're going to head over to our questions, because we've had loads of questions coming in before the sessions, and we've prepared some for the attendees as well. So for this session, I'll pass it on to our co-host. So I'll pass it on to Benedict, and she can direct the questions to our panelists. And I do tell you guys to, if you put any questions, make sure you put them in the chat box. And if you want the question directed to a specific barrister, please make it clear in the chat box. So Benedict, I'll pass it to you now.
Thank you, Sarah. So the first question that we've got, I think I'll just jump straight in it, because I feel like when it comes to finances, it's quite a touchy subject, but I think I'll just get straight into it. So we'll ask Baldip if that's okay. So in terms of, like, we'll start easy. So financial help from chambers and inns when you're starting out, like, what is available for people who have applied for pupillage and who obviously are going to be barristers?
Yeah, so financial help, as we've already mentioned, a significant factor and contributor is the inn. The inn is a huge source of financial support, as well as education and training. Finding an inn that fits you is really important. There are 4, you'd all probably already know that: Inner, Middle, Lincoln's and Gray's Inn. So if you haven't joined an inn already, go to their events, see what they're all about, look on their website, see what kind of events they hold, what kind of talks and seminars. For me, Inner Temple was the only one that had a vegetarian menu. And for me, in that dietary requirement, I don't do fish, meat or eggs of any sort. And in the temple, I wrote to them, they said, yeah, we can cater for that, not a problem. And that was it. That was the reason I chose Inner. But leaving that aside, find an inn that fits you. And yeah, I think that's really important. They have funds for a whole heap of reasons to assist you at every step of the way, whether that's your BPTC year, whether that's during pupillage or thereafter, and your career and training development. So that's really important. And also financial support from chambers. I don't know any chambers that pay for BPTCs like they do training contract styles. I've not heard of it. But chambers can assist financially. They have hardship funds. They have, some chambers have funds set up to try and assist people with maternity or paternity leave, which is really interesting. And given that that should have happened a long time ago, chambers are playing a little catch up on that. But at least we're getting there. And general assistance that Chambers can provide in your junior years or as a pupil. You won't be charged rent, or it'd be lower rent and commission. If they charge commission on your fees, of course, it may be reduced rate, and it's on a case by case basis in respect of those situations. I know that me and Rehana sit on the Bar Liaison Committee, and Dr. Chelvan does a lot of advisory work in terms of policy and guidance with the inns. And I know that in the Temple have set a lot of funds aside to assist junior members of the bar, and actually even seniors who have struggled through COVID. A lot of the silk work wasn't going to court, so they may have struggled financially as well. So I know a lot of people have applied for that support from the inns, and the inns have been invaluable. So there's a lot of financial support. There are probably other organisations that are there to encourage perhaps diversity or something like that, that you may be able to tap into their funds and sponsorships and things like that that can assist you as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Baldip. And in terms of sort of earnings, Rehana, what can we expect as an immigration barrister? What's sort of like the variation of earnings?
Okay, I'm off mute. The question is, how long is a piece of string? It can drastically vary depending in what kind of area. So immigration is incredibly broad. You kind of have immigration and sort of the asylum end of things, the immigration human rights side of things, and then you have sort of what's next to it is sort of the immigration public law. So the kind of unlawful detentions and unlawful deportations, the removal, there are different limbs to it, and each of them have their own different fees. Realistically, so to put into perspective, actually, a immigration or asylum matter that is legally aided is paid at a fixed fee at 302 at the first tier tribunal. A human rights application, I think off the top of my head, it's £248. And that will take you a whole day to prep that kind of case. Going to the upper tribunal is then done on an hourly rate, and I think off the top of my head it's about £55. Private fees from solicitors, if you get private cases, would match around those figures, maybe kind of go between the brackets of between 350 to maybe 700, depending FTT UT. The reality is, if you work in the public funded bar, your earnings are going to be lower. I think it's fair to say there are other areas of the bar which are far more lucrative than immigration. I'm not going to lie. If you want to earn serious money, go to the commercial chancery, go and do shipping, go to that area, because immigration is not sloshing with that kind of money. Realistically, in your first year, if you're doing heavy legal aid work, you're probably looking at earnings between 30 to 50. Thereafter, it's a matter to you about how much you network or what your selling points are, or equally what solicitors want to pay you as a fee, or what you market yourself as. And it can go all the way up to over £100,000. So there's a very wide kind of bracket of what you could earn. And it really depends on the nature and the kind of work that you do and at what level or stage that you get to.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very, very informative. And Dr. Chelvan, I wanted to ask, so in terms of being a barrister, and obviously you've been working as a barrister for ages, what type of skills would you say is necessary for someone to be a barrister and to obtain pupillage?
Well, we talked about interpersonal skills. So the biggest skill is advocacy skills. And when we talk about advocacy, we're not talking about just the ability to speak, but also the ability to listen. And that's very, very important, because we read people, we're people, we people watchers, we're those people at those teenage parties which are looking at how people interact. You know, we're curious about how people, it's all about body language. So that's really interesting. Writing skills, yeah? So, you know, issues in relation to how you can creatively write. You know, that horrible thing called Pressy writing when you were a teenager, yeah? How to condense, you know, 4 pages into 2 paragraphs. That is really a skill, which is really, really helpful in relation to that. So writing skills, teamwork. How can you work in a team? But the bar is also about leadership. Yeah, and it's really, I mean, it's quite funny, last year at the beginning of COVID, I ended up doing one of these online courses, the executive lead. I say I'm not an Oxford graduate, but I've got certificates on my wall here in executive leadership, and it's wonderful how that taught me the language of context, of vision, of mission statement. Yeah, so identify what drives you in that. So teamwork skills, leadership skills, writing skills, and advocacy skills, I would say, would be. But more importantly, it's like a contract. The way I sort of share it, it's like you have a contract law question about an implied term in a contract. Yeah. So what do you have to do? You talk about the general issues regarding implied terms, but you footnote the cases. So you have to footnote. I think in footnotes, how do you evidence those skills? So it's not just about writing that you have those skills, but how do you evidence skills? And then to really jump off the paper, how do you evidence those skills in a way which marks you as completely different from any other candidate? Yeah, that's why I think, identifying your unique selling point is a core issue in that, because then that everything flows out from it. And remember, I'm lovely today, but I'm bad cop on the interview panel. Quelle surprise, you may say. Me as a horrible, forensic, bad cop. Yes, I'm that person who will spot on your interview panel where's your Achilles heel. So make sure you can defend every single point, because I was politics and law at Southampton was social science, and I did something called qualitative methods, and we held focus groups. So somebody at an interview many years ago said, oh yes, they ran a focus group in relation to X, Y, and Z. I won't go into too much details. So I said, well, what was your null hypothesis? And they looked at me. I said, well, what was your null, because focus groups are null hypothesis. And he'd put down something to look good on his application form, which he knew nothing about. And that completely undermined his application. So I'm bad cop. I will spot on your application form that little secret which you thought would never be revealed, and I will cross-examine you on that. Oh, sorry, I will question you. I will investigate what's that. So make sure everything on that application form you can completely defend and speak fluently and eloquently about.
Can I just add on to what Chelvan said? If you end up with me on a panel, I play good cop. I'm a real softie. Because I feel really sorry for the poor candidates. So if you end up seeing me on a scholarship or a panel, know that I'm probably a really soft touch, to give you the heads up.
But I think for the record, neither Rehana, Baldip or I on the pupillage committees for 33, and that's why we're able to speak so candidly tonight.
Okay.
I was going to say, everybody's going to apply for 33 Bedford Row now.
well, no, I understand that there's been a huge surge in applicants who trying to join chambers on human rights specialism recently. So, that's good. It's important.
I'll just pass the questions over to Chili.
Thanks, Benedict.
Hello. I've got a few questions on preparation for pupillage interviews. Baldip, if I can start with you. How can you keep up with current affairs and constant immigration rules?
Okay, well, those of you that are interested in immigration will know that the rules are constantly changing, that it's the fastest moving area of law. Surprisingly, it used to be employment law. I never saw how that happened, but it's now immigration. There's constantly cases in the upper tribunal, the High Court, and the Court of Appeal, and in fact, the Supreme Court, and the CJEU and the Court of Human Rights. So keeping up to date with those are really important, and seeing what the current developments are. So in respect of that, I mean, the basics will be keeping up to date with what the BBC News is saying, but above and beyond that, on a legal aspect, has to be Bailey, so an immigration search engine, it's case law. They do a number of articles as well on that. The Immigration Law Practitioners Association, ILPA, they do a number of training sessions, an abundance of material in respect of case law that's coming out and its implications on those practicing the area. But of course, the various bar associations, you can become student members of the bar associations. You've got the Administrative Law Bar Association, you've got the Human Rights Lawyers Association, you've got the Family Law Bar Association. You can go to various events with the Law Society, which is great for networking. So not just networking with other barristers, crucial, we'll come on to it later in this talk, but crucial to be networking with those that are going to be instructing you in the future. So I've been to the Law Society for loads of events, whether it be a Diwali party, to, you know, something happening in the immigration field, whatever it is, it's great networking. And various other groups, networks, newsletters, e-bulletins, so you can, even our chambers, if you scroll down to the bottom, you enter your email address on there, all our newsletters come out to you. So subscribing to things like that is really important, so you are up to date with what's happening, because it's always impressive when someone knows, you know, the current developments in an interview, rather than just saying they want to be an immigration practitioner, actually knowing and following what's happening in politics, what's happening in case law and development, and policies and publications of how that's going to affect immigrants in the future.
Thank you for that, Baldip. Rehana, would you like to add anything to that? Have you got any tips on how you can keep up to date with current affairs? Sorry, you're on mute.
Hold on, okay, right. In the chat facilities, I've copied and pasted links to 3 websites that we use very regularly. So one is Free Movement, ILPA, and EIN. They have free news bulletins, sign up to them. I can say as a practitioner, I regularly use Free Movement and EIN and ILPA. They have wonderful materials. But if there's any big changes updated on immigration rules or major cases, those 3 websites would have done either a press release or a summary guidance, and they are my 3 go-to. So I've copied and pasted them in the chat for anyone who might be interested in.
And I'd also recommend, okay, this is the key thing, go and join Twitter, LinkedIn. We're all on Twitter, we're all on LinkedIn. It's been a godsend in relation to learning things happening as they happen. Especially if you're going for an interview, you know, before you go to an interview, see what's buzzing on Twitter and social media at the moment. And then there's quite a lot of, you know, influence, what we call influencers on there, and we contribute to the debate and the discussion and provide links to the website sites which Rehana's talking about, other sources of information. So it really helps you to have that edge to be up to speed and current in relation to what's going on.
Thank you for that. And then I've got another question. This one's for you, Rehana. What type of ethical questions do you get in pupillage interviews, and have you got any tips on how to respond to them?
Oh, ethics. You do get ethical questions. Normally, if I'm being brutally honest, pupillage interviews don't tend to throw you really hard curveballs on what is an ethical question. There'll be something very logical, like blah, blah, blah. Somebody has then offered to pay you. Do you take the cash, or what would you do in this scenario? It's normally tell your pupil supervisor, if you're a pupil, tell your head of chambers, go to your clerk, just tell somebody and then run away, and tell the bar council, PSB, whoever it is. When I say run away, as in just share the responsibility kind of thing. So do we have ethical questions? I think I'm the worst person to ask this question. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Maybe go to Chelvan. I think he might be better suited.
The whole thing with ethics questions at pupillage interviews, I mean, I know that a lot of barcasters now do an ethics course, don't you? So you have but the key role is that it's about integrity. You know, ethics is not just a case, it's a way of life. I mean, that's why when you are a barrister, you're held in a certain social standing where people think, I can trust you. Yeah. So how would you be able to show that somebody can trust you? And that comes from the very being of a person. You don't train that. It's who you are. So think of that as a person. What would I want to be if I wanted to make sure that not only what I do is right, but other people who watch me doing what I do can see that I'm setting an example. That's the way to look at an ethics question. Hope that helps.
Yeah, Thank you. Would you like to add to that, Baldip? Dip?
Sure. So having sat on the tenancy and pupillage committee at Chambers for many years when I joined, now having lesser time to sit on the panel, the ethics question that we'd pose was really to get a feel. I don't think ethics has a right or wrong answer as such as a spectrum. You know, I when we done the ethics papers, there were frequently asked questions and things like that. That's what we'd get asked questions about in the exam. You know, your client gives you a Rolex watch. Is that okay to accept as a gift or not? You know, those kind of questions. But it really is about integrity and your response to a situation. Ethical questions are going to arise day in, day out, 100 times a day when you're dealing with a client, whether it's, you know, dealing with a judge in a certain way, dealing with your instructions, your client, your opponent. So dealing with those, ethics really becomes part of your character as a barrister, I think. And that's what's important, and that's what the panel's trying to assess. You know, is that part of your character? Not whether you know the right or wrong answer, but are you able to deal with an ethical dilemma appropriately?
Thank you for that, Baldip. I've now got a question for Dr. Chelvan, and it's, what type of advocacy exercises do you get in immigration law pupillage interviews? And also, how do you prepare for these? And are you given the scenarios beforehand?
And please, you don't need to call me Dr. Chelvan, you can just call me Chelvan, please. Look, when looking at this issue, and you know, remember, I'm not talking about what 33 provides. I'm talking about the generic. You know, there could be bail. You've done bail applications at bar school. You know, you've got pleas mitigation in criminal law. All these sort of things in relation to, they're looking at your powers of advocacy. But I said, look, you're going to be one of several candidates in a day. So how do you approach an application? So let's look at the immigration issue, and I'm going to give you an insight of what I did at my advocacy exercise for when I got pupillage at Ghana Court. Then, in my day, the Home Secretary was a guy called Michael Howard. And the problem was that you were defending Michael Howard, who's in the youth court, and I had various, you know, outline in relation to this fictitious character. But what you do with preparation with an advocacy exercise is you like with anything with advocacy, you connect with your audience. So the arch enemy for Michael Howard at that time, before her Strictly Come Dancing days, was a person called Anne Widdecombe. So I stood.
Do the exam together.
Hello. Oh, yep. Okay, I'm there. Sorry, there was a hi, Bashira. I've started my advocacy. Thank you. See, it's amazing. I'm bad cop at home as well. I raise a voice to the dogs. Very tough. Okay, so I started my advocacy exercise saying my learned friend Miss Widdecombe has outlined the issues of the Crown. So the whole panel burst out into laughter. Why? I'd clearly taken on the performance of an advocacy exercise, but I inserted some humour, and it was topical. Yeah. So, you know, for example, at the moment, we've got Priti Patel at the Home Secretary. So if you go for an immigration pupillage interview, there could be a mock question where you're defending Priti Patel. So you think of a politician or a character who is diametrically opposed to Priti Patel. And you start by because always if you're working for the migrant, your opponent starts off first about why they shouldn't be granted bail. So you say, you know, Mr. X has given the outline for opposing bail from the Crown for my client. So you're adding some humour. So when you approach an advocacy exercise, you know what the outline of the advocacy exercise, and insert some humour into that to be able to gain the interest and engagement of the interview panel.
Thank you for that. Rehana, would you like to add anything to that in terms of advocacy exercises? Any tips?
You're muted.
You're mute.
Okay, I'm muted. The usual exercise, particularly for an immigration tip, is normally going to be a bail. because that's the only thing that you could really do as an immigration practitioner, an immigration interview, which is quick. We don't have pleas in MITs like you do in crime. There is an application, so it's normally going to be a bail, so top tip there. I agree with everything that Chelvan has said. I remember for one of my advocacy exercises, I had to do an immigration bail. And I think I used the line across the line of, the guy had fallen in love with one of the prison officer people, something like that. Vague memory. And my line was, you can't help who you've fallen in love with. It's accepted their relationship was founded in peculiar circumstances, but love will find a way, or something very cheesy like that. But it got a laugh from the panel and I got pupillage, so it may have worked. So yeah, I agree. Try and find something to sort of latch onto, exactly what Chelvan said. But normally for an immigration set, it would usually be a bail. So top tip.
Thank you for that. And Baldip, did you have any different? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there is the first year tribunal bail guidelines, so get that on the internet. So you say, you know, sir, and know how you're mode addressed, sir or madam, in a bail application. So you can say, look, as the guidance says at paragraph 19, so you're familiar with certain of the issues. To give you that extra point, it's just like, you know, show you have knowledge and you have knowledge plus.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chelvan. I was going to ask you, Baldip, if you had anything to add to that in terms of tips for advocacy exercises.
Advocacy in pupillage interviews, no one expects you to be a silk. But what they do want to see is a diamond in the rough, something that they can polish. You know, you're not going to know all the immigration rules. You're not going to know, you know, all the relevant case law. You know, that's not expected of you so much. It's more, are you authoritative? Are you persuasive? Are you confident? Do you dwindle when there's judicial intervention? So these are the things that any chamber is assessing you as a member of their team is going to be looking out for. So work on the basics first, and work on the basics, and you know, make sure your foundation's strong.
Thank you for that, Baldip. And I've got a question here. That's a follow-up to your question, Rehana, if you could address it. And it was, let me just get it up. What do you do if you've got an interview and you have to prepare for a specific news topic that you're asked and you know nothing about it?
Can you repeat the question? What would you do if you've got an interview?
Yeah, and you have to prepare, if you have to prepare for an interview and you don't know anything about the specific news topic that you're asked about.
In the interview?
Yeah.
Fess up. Number one. There's an extent to which you can bullshit. Sorry for my language, but normally fess up and outline the parameters of your knowledge. So if you get suddenly asked about something very niche or peculiar, but for example, if somebody asks you tomorrow in an interview, so what do you think of the outcome of the Supreme Court decision in the Shamima Begum case? If you tell me you don't know that, I am going to judge you. I'm not going to lie, because everyone should know this. It's been topical news. But if it's something particularly niche, and I can't see a panel doing that to you, but if they do, my advice to you is A, fess up and say, okay, I'm really sorry, I'm not familiar with this. However, and then try your best to think, because it is a task of you thinking on your feet. That's what happens to barristers every day in court. I get asked a question and sometimes I won't know the answer just immediately. Sometimes I'll need just a moment to pause and think, and I've got to think quickly on my feet. So if you need to pause and think, say, can I just have a moment and just think? Because rather than you spewing all this kind of, yes, not going to look good. Take a moment, collect your thoughts, say what your parameters are, and then say what you can answer to the question to the best of your abilities. But just keep the level of BS to a minimum would be my advice, as best you can.
Thanks for that, Rehana. And Sheldon, I was just going to ask if you could add to that. What do you do in a circumstance where it's before the interview and you've been given to prepare for a news topic? Where do you start if you know nothing about the news interview?
Google. easily, if it's before the interview and you're asked a question, Google it. Yeah, so that's, and barristers get, it prepares you for real life beautifully, because I remember when I was at uni, you'd always spot the solicitor and who was going to be the barrister. I had a very good friend of mine called Natalie, who's now a CPS lawyer, and she'd always go to the library and write little case notes about every single case, yeah, and to put it on little index cards. I loved land law at uni, but I hated trusts. So what used to happen is that on trust law seminars, I used to go into the trust law seminar, I'd say, "Hi Natalie, how are you? Nice to see you." I used to grab her index cards, not grab, I asked her for it. Clearly there was no violence, but I used to take her index cards, look at the index cards. My personal tutor in trust law came in, Natalie Lee, and she'd ask questions and I'd be able to recite it. And Natalie just looked at me every week, like with dagger eyes, and said, "Yeah, that's why you're going to be solicitor, I'm going to be a barrister." Yeah, so it's about assimilating information really quickly. So that's what you do, and getting the key points. Yeah, that's really important. I remember also going back my pupillage interviews in pre-COVID days, you'd go into your interview and you'd look at the Chambers newsletter, yeah, on the side, or go online these days. And I remember at Garden Court, we were just doing something on the white paper, yeah, and it's in their newsletter. And I remember being asked, "What do you think about the most recent developments in immigration law?" I said, "Well, I think it's really interesting what they're saying about the white paper." I'd only read about it 5 minutes beforehand in the reception area, and they all looked at me like, "Oh, wow, this," so look at what's on your Chambers website regarding what they're really into. We have an insights section, about certain things, what I call sexy law issues, which are going on at the moment. Yeah, so look at what really interests the members of those chambers and be able to ping it in. Remember, you are a storyteller based on truth, not fiction, but you are a storyteller. So engage with the people who are on that panel. So if it's an issue in relation to before the interview, Google it. If you're in interview, whilst Rehana's quite clearly fess up, because we can see right through somebody who's lying. Think, look, I'm not able to answer that question, but I can look at it from a different angle or through first principles, and you'll get more marks by doing that than somebody who has, read a few articles, because you're actually showing your thought process, and that's what's important.
Thank you for that, Rehana and Chelvan. I just want to go to Baldip. Would you like to add anything to that?
No, I don't think I can helpfully add anything more to that question.
Okay, thank you. I'll just pass over back to you, Benedict.
Thank you, Chile. So in terms of sort of social awareness and news, so we've asked each panel every time we've done this, but can each panel member give me one topic they would recommend researching for interviews at the moment? Baldip, if you'd like to start, please.
All right. Well, my practice area, like I mentioned earlier, was this overlap between family law and immigration, working with the BAM community. For me, at the moment, in that niche area, I'm sure Rehana and Dr. Chelvan will come up with more proper immigration, if I can call it that, articles. But for me right now, it was a Divorce, Dissolution and Separation Act 2020, which comes into force in the autumn. Just recently wrote an article on it because it's so important in my community, as well as generally, but I say in my community because it changes the law significantly. So to have a divorce, previously you'd have to prove adultery, unreasonable behaviour, desertion, 2 years separation or 5 years, where consent's not required. That's changing now to what we call a no-fault divorce, where we're not focusing on the blame. It's all about the marriage breaking down. So the statement stands as evidence and that's it. And why that's important for BAM community with significantly high numbers of DV and immigration issues is that it takes away from that hostility. So I'm going to be very stereotypical now, and you'll have to forgive me, but in a case where husband marries wife, it may be done for a visa, he is beating her black and blue, and she's come to her senses after a very long time with the right support now that she wants to leave this marriage. Previously, it was so difficult for her to get a divorce. And even if she found the money, got legal advice, lodged with court, she'd be waiting a long time, you know, and it was another way. For example, the husband didn't sign the divorce papers because, of course, his immigration application's pending. Yeah. So in such situations, he's still exerting coercive control over her because he's not signing the divorce papers, and that could have gone on for ages, years. So this Divorce, Dissolution and Separation Act, for me at the moment in my area of practice, immigration and family law, is really important. But it's not the proper immigration, if I can call it that. I'll leave that to Chelvan and Rehana.
Thank you so much, Baldip. Rehana, which one would you recommend?
I'll mute myself. For me, the most interesting case would have to be, and I think I referred to it earlier, is the Shamima Begum Supreme Court case, because it plays a really fascinating, and I think certainly as an immigration practitioner, I was shocked by that decision by the Supreme Court. I think most people will look at it and be really surprised by the decision. And it's fascinating because for the first time ever, the Supreme Court has, above kind of access to justice, above that has put in public security and public interest. And that's the first case that I know where it's put it in such stark terms, and the most recent authorities. So I think that that's a really fascinating case that really kind of highlights, and that's a big change because access to justice was such a fundamental always. And we can see that in previous determination, like for example, Hashim Ali, which dealt with out of country deport appeals and saying, well, that's not sufficient, you can't have access, remove it. Whereas, and I feel, I shouldn't criticize, I'm not a Supreme Court judge, so I'm not going to go there, but this is very murky insofar as the determination itself and its findings and how it squares and what is that balance. So for me, that's a fascinating judgment. It raises some very serious fundamental questions about the interplay between human rights, immigration, and kind of public security, and that whole mixture of those various strands of law coming together. Plus, it's incredibly topical at the moment. So if I was going to pick a case, it would probably be that.
Thank you so much, Rana. Dr. Chelvan, what would you say?
Well, where do I start? I mean, there's a difference between cramming up about an issue or a case where you think that you may be asked questions about it. And Shamima Begum is clearly one of the lead cases. I'd also advise anybody to, just before the interview, a couple of days beforehand, go onto the Supreme Court website, go onto Bailey on the Civil Appeals, Court Appeals Office, and see what are the recent cases which have been reported. Things change week in, week out. I'm a refugee lawyer. You know, that's what 90% of my caseload is. And for me, you know, what happened with the migrants and Calais crossing and the changes to the immigration rules to be able to address that. So the battle between politics and law and rights is very much central to what's going on. This Thursday, there is the publication of a report in relation to future judicial review in the immigration context, and so quite a few of that's been announced today. So that's where go Twitter. You know, I'm S_Chelvan, Baldip is Singh Barrister 1, and Rehana is on. You know, go onto Twitter and see what's on there now, which interests you, but also do the research. And when you're looking at a case, you know, and I was helping on 2 nights last week for the Sikh Lawyers Association on pupillage preparation. If you're asked about a case, the majority of your panel will know what the facts are. It's only in the Court of Appeal, as an advocate, do I have to stand up to briefly recite what the facts are. So you say something as, the panel will be fully aware of the facts of the case unless the panel wishes me to outline them. So you immediately go back into what's the core issues in the case, what is the ratio in the case, what is the rule in the case, and then present both arguments, the opposite arguments of how that case could have been decided, and then come to your own conclusion. Because that shows analysis, yeah? So when you're looking at, when you've been given a case 20-25 minutes, briefly remember what the facts are, but, you know, use that get out. You know, the panel will be aware of the facts. You know, I want, unless the panel wish me to recite the facts. Yeah, the majority of the panel say, great, let's move on, because we've had 20 people giving 20 different versions of what the facts are. Yeah. And then go in relation to the case. So yeah, look at what's interesting. There's been this is, as I say, an area of law which is full of activist lawyers because of the way of the interface between politics. Look at legal aid, the issues regarding legal aid and what's happening with legal aid. I gave evidence of the All Parliamentary Party on legal aid in January regarding the future of legal aid. So look at those issues which really affect, and those issues specifically will affect you as a junior lawyer. Yeah, and that's very important. And clearly, of course, how COVID has impacted the bar and the profession and your everyday life. Also, another important issue, well-being. We as a profession very much look at mental health and well-being and how you've dealt with strategies in relation to your own well-being and how you'll use that in your own life. Digital working, court use, court use, digital remote hearings, what are the benefits and disadvantages? So for example, when you're doing a hearing, the fact that your client is not in the same room as you, has a huge difference in relation to client comfort and understanding and trust. But also if you have the client, if the client is in that room, what are the precautions regarding health and safety? So, there's a spectrum of issues. And as I say, with anything, find something which really interests you and evidence your passion. Because if you're not passionate about immigration law, forget it. Seriously, forget it. I mean, I was offered, when I finished at Harvard in 2001, 20 years ago, I was offered a starting salary of $120,000 as a newly fledged attorney. Yeah, I came back because all my British friends are Brittany's human rights lawyers. So if you want to go have the money, the opportunity for the money is there, as I think Baldip and Rehana said quite eloquently earlier on in the session. So don't do immigration law for the money, but if you want to work in a field where, for me, I get the thank you card which says thank you for saving my life. Well, that's priceless. So to be able to work in that field, you really need to evidence your passion for the work.
Thank you so much. So there was a question in the audience that I wanted to ask, and it kind of bands in together with a few other questions we received before as well. So somebody asked, does your chambers take on many older, so late 40s, career changes, and is it realistic for someone like them to obtain pupillage? If you'd like to answer that, please, Chelvan.
I think you need to ask Baldip because he's on the pupillage. He was on the pupillage committee. I mean, for us, I think from a general proposition, we don't discriminate. As I said, you just need to go onto our Chambers website to say that diversity and inclusion is a fact. Yeah. So we do want to take on the best, but I think Baldip or Rehana would be, because I've only been in Chambers for a short while, in relation to on-hand experience in relation to selection procedures.
Okay, thank you. And Baldip, would you like to address that question, please?
I think Chambers actually, in fact, encourages those from all walks of life to apply for pupillage and or tenancy at Chambers. Life experience is invaluable, particularly in the areas of family law and immigration, and coming with that knowledge, rather than just simply fresh out of college, if we can say it like that, is really important. Understand that your life experiences of whether it be immigration issues or family law issues, your dealings with the law as you grow are really important. So we've had actually a vast number of people that have come to the bar late or that have qualified from, cross-qualified from another country, or solicitors coming to the bar at a later stage. So we have a number of those as well at Chambers. That's not to say that, coming straight out of university and your BPDC and straight into pupillage isn't possible, because that's what I did. But I think it's important to note that you do need to come with some experience. Academics is just standard these days. Coming with your experiences, for me, for example, I was working at 3 different law firms every year, 3 different law firms every year. So I was doing a Wednesday, a Friday and a Saturday, a Wednesday at firm A, Friday at firm B, and then another firm on Saturday mornings. And every year I'd swap them over, because for me, those became my instructing solicitors. So that made me really lucrative to Chambers through pupillage, and also when I applied for tenancy. So that experience, having that first-hand dealings with clients and living through them, actually, so my training was slightly different. I lived through my clients and their difficulties and their interactions with the law. When I was writing their statements, I was living through them. So I was gaining a lot of experience that way. I may not have had my own life experiences as such with my runnings with the law, but I did with my clients. So that I brought to the table.
Thank you. Rehana, did you want to add to that at all?
I think in the chat it was Rachel who raised one of these questions. Some of the best barristers that I know came to the career late in the bar. And I mean, barristers that I seriously aspire to be like, all came to the bar later in life. So your age is absolutely no limitation, and including at bar school, some of the best candidates who you could just look at and be like, you're going to get pupillage in a heartbeat, because they have so much more life experience. So the only thing I would say to you, Rachel, is do not feel that your age at all is a limitation, because I can tell you that the best counsel, some of the best counsel that I know came later on, that life experience will put you in such good stead and put you head and shoulders above some of the other candidates. Furthermore, it is your USP, use it. When I was looking for pupillage, I sought out chambers that were positively discriminating. I sought out chambers that were saying, we encourage applications from those who are not represented at the bar. And I was like, great, because I tick so many of those boxes. I am brown, I am an immigrant, I am dyslexic, I am this. The only box ticking that I didn't feel was that I wasn't LGBT or wasn't queer. I was like, the rest of it I've got down. Okay, so I picked the sets that were going to discriminate, and I targeted my applications. And that's what I'll say to anyone who feels that they don't fit that traditional mold. Do your research, find the sets that are carrying out those positively encouraging those under-repped, not typical candidates. But no way is it a hindrance, and you can absolutely make it, because I know people who have.
Yeah. And there's I want to make the official note that their sets don't positively discriminate. We're all looking for merit, but we may ensure that those who are disadvantaged from certain sectors of society get an equal bite at seat at the table. So I just want to qualify, Rehana, before there's suddenly a rush on legal. Something you've said. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I have another one of those sort of how likely are you questions. So obviously we've done the ones where, you know, if you're of a certain age, but in terms of if you haven't done the bar course yet, how likely are you to obtain pupillage? Baldip, if you'd like to answer that one for me, please.
So if you haven't done the bar course,
Yeah.
how likely are you to obtain pupillage? I think it's unlikely if you haven't done the bar course, because I think you have to do the bar course to qualify. But if you mean if you're at the stage of just your degree and you're considering coming to the bar, there is every likelihood of you obtaining pupillage. The system is getting fairer for everybody. It is all about you, I think. If you feel you have what it takes, if you've done your mini Ps and spoken to barristers and spoken to them about the hours that they put in, and, you know, late instructions, and, you know, sacrificing family life and all the other sacrifices we have to make, you know, standing up your friends constantly because you've got prep to do, cancelling all your other commitments, and your main commitment is to the bar, and I think you may have what it takes for a career at the bar and succeeding. And if that doesn't turn you away, then I think, yeah, there's every likelihood that you can succeed and obtain pupillage. It's all about you and your self-belief. You know, you look in the mirror, you think, am I a barrister? Can I be a barrister? and only you know the answer to that, right?
Thank you very much. And I just have one more of them, so I want to ask Rehana. So in terms of securing a pupillage without a 2-1, how likely is that? Thank you, on mute again.
Sorry. I made that face because a 2-1 is normally the baseline requirement. There are 2 exceptions to it that I've seen, whereby I know people who have got it. I sit on a number. I normally sit on the in scholarship panel interviews. What I can say is this: sometimes you have candidates who've come later on in life, and in previous times they would have got a 3rd in their degree in like the 80s or the 70s, but since moving on from that, they've got 20 years experience working in industry or whatever it is. Their subsequent kind of life experience compensates or makes up for it, or it's significantly different. You can see it was just a totally different time. That will be it. The second time that I can see you can mitigate it, and I say mitigate that 3rd, is by either explaining the exceptional circumstances that may have arisen. It might be you would have had a significant family bereavement, or something happened to yourself, or you were ill, or whatever it was. If there was mitigation as to your 3rd, put that in and be upfront about it. And if you do have a 3rd, I would say go and do a master's, work damn hard and go get a 1st, to demonstrate to the panel that actually my previous academia is because of these factors. And look, when I don't have those kind of adverse factors affecting me, I can do outstandingly academically. The reality is the vast majority who come to the bar or apply either have 2-1s or 1sts. There are the statistics from the Bar Council, and I think, you've got to forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think on the last stats that I remember, it was 3% of those who got pupillage got 3rds. So I mean, absolutely exception. But I would suspect normally those individuals will either have a master's or upwards to kind of mitigate for that 3rd. So if you're just looking at a 3rd right now, I would say hold your horses from applying, go do a master's.
And it's not a 3rd, it's a 2-2.
Oh, sorry, a 3rd or a 2-2, anything below. So kind of anything below a 2-1, I'm saying if you've got a 2-2 or a 3rd, fix it up by either doing some sort of postgraduate degree and doing great on it that demonstrates your academic ability, and explain in your applications what led to that grade, because there'll have to be some sort of mitigation.
Thank you very much. I'll pass the questions back to Chili, if that's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that, just because I received a message which is pretty similar to that. And if you can answer this, Baldip first. And they say that they got just slightly off very competent, and this was due to a neurotypical disability. Will that place them in a disadvantage despite having a good application and good experience?
Can I answer that? I got a competent because my computer crashed because I'm dyslexic. And so I had extra time and a computer, but the computer crashed. And at that point it crashed right towards the end, and it wiped everything. And then I had to just redo the whole thing right there. So my exam lasted 8 hours without a break because I wasn't allowed outside of that room. And it was horrendous. And it happened to both of my written exams, which was opinion writing and drafting. And that affected my grade, or else I would have ended up with a VC. Everything else was fine. I got a couple of outstanding on my advocacy, and my written work is, as a dyslexic, is the bit that I find most challenging. But what I did do is I explained it in my applications. I explained exactly what happened. I said, these are my grades for everything else. This is what I got in the coursework part of it when we had it. I am very competent, but this is the reason what's led me to my competent. And honestly, no one ever cared was the response. They said, yep, that's very fine. Thank you for explaining it, for taking the time out to explain it, but that's okay. But just explain it. If that has happened to you and that was the reason why, just explain it, because that's exactly what happened to me. So sorry, I know that was Baldip's question, but I just felt I could answer that because...
You know, it's fine. I was going to pass to you after anyway, so thanks for answering that first. Baldip, would you like to add to that, please?
No, not really. I think Rehana speaks from personal experience and she's best placed to respond to that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Chelvan, would you like to add to that?
No, I think that's quite clear. You know, I mean, the bar, I mean, there are places within your pupillage interview applications where you can talk about extenuating circumstances. So that's the proper point to be on in context. And that, you know, as I said, you know, you can look, you know, context is important. So not only why the individual got a competent, rather very competent, but you know, looking at all other aspects of the application, which should show that that person shines. What I do get annoyed about is the number of times I've had to read in an application that I got 2.6% away from a first. Yeah, that, who cares? You got a 2-1. Yeah, so you know, don't put that, because that is just nauseating and we just get turned off by that. You didn't get a first. Okay, live with it. Yeah, so but that's completely different from the example which we're talking about. But I just wanted to add that in case anybody wants to put that in an application. Don't put I got 2% off a first.
Thank you for
You're
that.
really, really bad cop on the panel, aren't you, Chelvan?
Yeah, but I get the best. Yeah, it's about getting, you know, the talent. I mean, you know, let's have another truism. The bar is hard. The bar is not about getting you work. You're not employed by anybody. You're self-employed. Yeah, so you're only as good as you are. And you know, the problem is, if you get a 2-2 and it's not to do with extenuating circumstances, that is just your academic ability, you're going to find it tough. Yeah, because you don't want to be at the bar for 5 minutes. Yeah, you want to be at the bar for 20 years. The bar for me is a vocation. Now, when I went to the bar, I saw my life at the bar. So unless you have that view that you want to spend, you know, it is a vocation, it's not a job. But remember, you can only get work by being the best. Your clients expect the best. They don't expect somebody mediocre. Yeah, that has got nothing to do with your social economic background. Yeah, as I've shown. Yeah, so it's all about being the best and achieving the best outcomes for you, and to be able to shine so your client gets the best representation.
Thank you for that, Chelvan.
And I love that somebody called me the Simon Cowell of the interview panel. That room box. If only I had his money. There we are.
And I just wanted to ask, just while we're still on the topic, Rehana, in terms of the bar course, like with undergraduate level law degree, you said 2-1 is kind of the baseline. So would you say a VC is the baseline for that, or it doesn't matter?
It really depends, and I think that I know several barristers, several chambers that really don't care about what you got on the BPTC. They want to know that you passed it, because the BPTC isn't actually a good indication of either academia or kind of your ability to be a barrister. We all know it is an absolute memory test that you're essentially put through about how much you can memorize and how good you are memorizing. And that's just going to play to some people's skill than others. So it's split bag. But from my experience, from certainly some of the panels that I've sat on, I know certain sets they just want to know that you've passed. They'll say VC, but honestly, it's anyone who's passed is fine. If you have got a competent, you can explain it. The only people that will kind of really rise above it will be the outstandings, and it's credit absolute where it's deserved. So an outstanding top in the country, or the highest result in whatever it might be, yeah, that's just playing into a different ball game. And those individuals highlight it like hell on your application and sing it from the rooftops. You've done amazingly well. But for all of the rest of us, it's okay. Competent should be fine. Just explain it.
Thank you for that, Rehana. And I'm also going to ask you some more questions from the audience. Baldip, if I can start with you. Someone in the audience put, what tips do you have for those who have upcoming pupillage interviews for the first time?
Well, hopefully they've heeded the advice that we've given so far. in terms of being prepared. Tips for interviews. That's such a broad question. Tips for interviews. The usual stuff first. Research the chambers, make sure you know what they're posting on their social media, what their recent cases are, knowing what they're about, you know, the areas of law they practice. It's great to be able to mention, oh, well, I was following such and such a case, and, you know, I found it really interesting that this happened in there, or whatever it might be. You know, when you've got that opportunity to speak to the panel members. Tips for interviews. Be yourself. I think that's my only tip I'd give anyone going to an interview. Don't pretend to be something. Be you. You want to be a barrister. Tell them why you should be a barrister and why you fit in that chambers. Tell them why you're going to be an excellent candidate, not only the academics and the excellence and the advocacy, but also a financial investment. And people, again, I've mentioned it, Dr. Chelvan's more on the academic excellence side. For me, it's a business. Maybe that's my Indian blood. You know, my questions on panels have always been about generating work. How do you think the bar works now? Where do you get instructions from? People still don't know. You'd be surprised. Chambers? No, you don't solely rely on chambers, you know, and understand how that works. And that comes from your experiences of mini pupillages, because in my scholarship interview, and I remember someone that was standing, I won't say who it was, someone was standing in the back just observing the interviews, and they'd asked me why I had particularly focused on 2 KBW. And the answer I'd given, you know, I said I've been to such and such a chambers, a huge chamber as it was, and I've been to such and such a chambers, a very small set, and I know I want to be in a family environment, in that middle set. I want to be where I am not just a cog in this engine, where I am not just, you know, a number or a barrister they can send to court and I don't have my own name. I don't want to be at a set where, you know, the juicy work's not coming in. I want to be, you know, known for the work I do. So you're really going to have an understanding of the bar. That's really important when you come to a pupillage interview. Being realistic, showing why you're a valuable asset. I think, yeah, I think those are the things that one should come to in terms of an interview.
Thank you for that. And Chelvan, would you like to add anything to that?
I love the Francis Bacon quote, sorry, Thomas Hobbes, knowledge is power. Yeah, so use your soft power, use your knowledge to be able to convey your message and who you are. And as Baldip says, you know, it's about making sure that it's a two-way process. You know, there were certain sets I was interviewed at, and you know, we really don't have time to go into all the stories. Oh, sorry, my husband's just come back, so you're going to have 2 dogs who are going to bark very loudly at the moment because he's come back. So I'm just sorry about that. This is, you know, modern living, lovely Zoom control life. Yeah, you see, they're happy he's come home. Being your true self. That where it's a two-way process about whether you fit and whether they fit you. Yeah, they're looking at you about whether you're right for their set because you've already gotten through the paper sift. Yeah, so the point is it's a two-way process. I mean, as I said, I you know, have a hearing impairment in my left ear, and I won't name the person, but this individual was very, very, very well known with respect to their reputation as a human rights barrister, but also very well connected to the political sphere. And they'd read in my interview that at that time I used a hearing aid, which had an induction loop facility. Clearly hadn't read any of my other application forms, such as, you know, finalist in the World Public Speaking Competition and done TV and radio. So, you know, the first thing this individual said is, when we started, is, we do not have an induction loop facility. However, if you can't hear what we are saying, please ask us to repeat ourselves. I knew very quickly on that that was not the right set for me, because if that's how that individual felt that people with hearing impairments, with hearing aids, are to be spoken to, that wasn't really a set I could connect with. It's a great after dinner story now, but you know, it sort of illustrates the fact that, you know, be prepared, but also, as I said, part of advocacy is not only speaking, but the ability to listen. So engage with your environment, because you are going to, you know, I mean, one thing which we haven't covered is pupillage is hell on earth. You know, you can be top of the class, but once you get into pupillage, and you know, I remember early on in my first six, my supervisor asked me a simple question, and my brain knew the answer, but my mouth decided to say gobbledygook. It was nonsense. But my brain was saying, this is the answer. But my mouth was saying gobbledygook. And I kid you not, when I had my first ever pupil in 2009, I was just looking at her because she was doing exactly the same. You know, I asked her a simple question. It wasn't a trick question. And I could see her brain quite clearly knowing the answer, but she was talking gobbledygook. Yeah, because that's the nerves of doing pupillage, the imposter syndrome. And, you know, Rehana talks about, you know, I have imposter syndrome now, and I do, you know, cutting edge litigation both here in the UK and globally. Yeah, I still like, what the hell am I doing here? You know, seriously, me, you know? And it takes on a different guise when you're a person of color, you know. You know, I still go into rooms where I'm the only person of color, and then the only people of color who come into the rooms are the refugees. So, you know, there's a lot of power and structural and institutional imbalances here, but does that stop us being our true selves? No. So going back to how do you prepare for an interview? Well, how do you prepare for life? Yeah, use those skills.
Thank you for that, Chelvan. Rehana, would you like to add anything to any tips for a first time interview?
Yeah. Reality is you're going to be partially judged in how you, well, as a barrister, we are judged every day in how we present ourselves. So present yourself well, wear your suit, look the part, not only sound the part, but look the part of a barrister. Do not be late. It is so unimpressive. It does not look good. Plan your journey in advance. Make sure, it doesn't matter. I turned up to my interview 2 hours early and sat in a coffee shop opposite it for 2 hours because I did not want to be late. Do not be late. And whatever measure you have to go to ensure that you are on time and you look sharp and properly prepared, and just do the basics, absolute basics. Learn who's going to be interviewing, and they will tell you. If you email, you say, can I just ask who will be made up of the panel? Some chambers will tell you. It's just about asking the right questions, but just be prepared. Do not be late, and just don't look messy and disheveled. It's big put off. Don't do it. Would be my kind of basic advice.
Thank you for that, Rehana. And I also wanted to ask, Baldip, do you know if 33 Bedford Row have any plans of offering mini pupillages remotely? And also, do you know when applicants that have applied for pupillage will hear back about the applications normally?
In terms of mini Ps, yes, we are offering them. Yes, we are doing remote mini Ps. If you send a covering letter and your CV through to the clerks, they'll send it on to the relevant person who will be able to assist, probably the team leaders, in respect of the areas that the person's applied for. In respect of pupillages right now,
I'm expecting hundreds of applications now. Yeah, thank you very much.
I've got Chelvan's email address. You can circumvent the clerks. No, I'm joking. Don't. To the clerks first. And in terms of pupillages, I think you'll have to contact chambers to find out what the current timetable is. I know that we are taking on 2 or 3 pupils, 2 pupils. Chelvan, no more. I wasn't involved this year, but I think we're taking on 2, and there'll be a timetable set in terms of interviews and when they're going to be joining.
Thank you for that, Baldip. Chelvan, would you like to add anything to the question?
No. I mean, the thing is that when it comes to mini pupillages, what I really, you know, tear my rather receding hair out for is seeing applicants who do more than 6 mini pupillages. Don't. No, especially if you're going to the immigration and human rights area, do a maximum of 5 or 6, do at least 1 or 2 placements in a solicitor's office because we need to know how the other half live, yeah? And then spend your time doing something quirky, something different in relation to community work, especially, you know, when it comes to how do you connect to your community? How are you the advocate? So you need to spend time doing NGO, or, you know, but also realize that, you know, working, you know, in a department store or a shop, you know, these are all life skills as well. You know, looking at teamwork, leadership. So use, you know, take a step back and think, how can I evidence these core interpersonal skills in a way which will, as I said, it's the X factor. What is your USP? What will make you jump from that paper? And that's what's really important. You know, in my year, everybody did death penalty work in America. Yeah, not that is bad, but everybody did that. Yeah, and you do get worried that everybody's, you know, founded an NGO in Ecuador. Yeah, but you know, I kid you not. I remember, and I'll give this as another true anecdote. I remember being, you know, bad cop on the interview panel many years ago, and I said, you know, you look at all of this, and you know, it's almost like they've worked for, insert expletive, Mother Teresa. And I kid you not, the first candidate who walked in for that final round had actually done volunteer work for the Calcutta mission. I kid you not. But this candidate failed on their advocacy. They were terrible in the advocacy exercise. So really do cut your cloth in relation to conveying your strongest sense of why you want to be a barrister and why you want to join that set. This is going to be on YouTube forever, I'm worried about it.
Thank you for that, Chelvan. And I'm just going to pass back over to Sarah if you've got any more questions.
Yes, I'll pass it to Benedict because she's got a quick question before I go on. So Benedict.
So we'd just like to ask sort of like a expectation versus reality to all the panelists. Baldip, if you'd like to start, what's one thing you expected from a career at the bar and what was the reality really like? If you have to think about it, it's okay.
My expectation was, I think, probably similar to all you guys, doing all the awesome stuff, that eureka moment when you're cross-examining, you know, flaunting into court, doing your thing, walking back out, you know, going to all these lavish restaurants, perhaps. It was in the films, wasn't it? You watch Suits, you see all of that sort of stuff, and that's what your expectation is. In reality, I just wanted to go, thought the best way to look at reality is to show you what it is I do. So I get up at 4:30 in the morning, well, 4:15. I start my prayers at 4:30. 5:30, I'm ready to start reading papers. I'm drafting my attendance note for yesterday's hearings. I'm doing proofing any draft orders from the hearing before. I'm drafting a case summary perhaps for this morning's case, which is listed this afternoon. You'll do a whole day in court. You'll finish around 4:30, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. from court, Birmingham. And then you're looking at your papers for the following day. For some reason, solicitors think that the goal is to get you the papers by close of business, and seem to think that we don't want any family time or some sleep. So we get our bundles in the evening and we're reading those and preparing for the next day's hearing, as well as trying to draft orders ahead of the hearing so you can send them into the judge, prepare position statements, skeleton arguments. On top of that, you'll be doing drafting. So your judicial review grounds for appeal, grounds for permission to appeal. You'll be writing articles, doing all the other social media stuff, marketing and advertising. On top of that, I do a lot of opinion writing for various solicitors, which is obviously outside of court time. So you've got to fit all that in. I did a to-do list today, actually, on my Twitter feed and stuff, to just all the stuff I had to do today. And probably out of the 10 points, I've probably done about 7. And I still got to prepare my cross-examination for 2 expert witnesses that I'm hearing tomorrow. and I've got to leave my house in Birmingham to head over to London, drive down in the morning, meet my client at 8:30 because he's really nervous, head over to court for 9 o'clock, and then I'm in court all day tomorrow. And I'm in court all week on the same matter, with various documents still coming in. Mid-trial, we're day 3 or 4 now. So local, other parties are still sending us new medical disclosure, police disclosure still coming in. So you're constantly dealing with yesterday, today, tomorrow, your clerks, the judges, the barristers, your solicitors, keeping everybody happy. What is it? You have to become a juggler with all of those things. And that is a reality. The reality is I probably sleep 4.5 hours a day. I may be able to get a nap in the car when I'm waiting outside of court or something, The reality is that you're going to Tesco and getting a meal deal. That's the reality of the bar, because you're just having coffee, constantly just having coffee, which isn't great. But that is the reality of the bar. Would I change it? No. Why? Because I friggin' love it. It's my passion, it's my drive. I'm making a change. Like, I don't want to discuss in detail the case I'm doing tomorrow, but it's a significant life-changing decision for this whole family. And all the odds were stacked up against us when I read the papers, last week. And where we're at now, partway through evidence, I'm just seeing glimmers of hope, and actually it's just fueled me to get through this week as well, because it's going to make a significant change to this whole family. And that's, it's not about financial remuneration alone, it's that change, and that's what we all came to the bar for, right? So that's reality. Very little sleep, lots of coffee, not looking after yourself. But we're moving there with this well-being policy. So we're trying some yoga and meditation, 3 minutes a day, if we can squeeze it in.
Thank you so much. Rehana, what would you say in terms of your expectation versus the reality of it?
I haven't really had much, like Baldip kind of encompassed it all right there. That was absolutely everything and then some about the reality of the bar. I honestly, he described life just, different person operating in the same life on the same scales. I think Baldip summed it up perfectly. There's very little that I can add on.
Rehana, you've had those kind of hours this week, haven't you? The 4.5 hours sleep.
Yeah, I was working to put into perspective about how much work it takes. This entire weekend I've worked. I've gone to sleep for the last week at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I've woken up every day at 7. And I've worked every day from about 7:30, 8, all the way up till 4 a.m. It is relentless, and I genuinely relentless. I can do it because I love it and because this is what I'm passionate about. But if you're not, don't do it. You will not succeed. You will fail. I can say that with certainty. Unless your heart is in this and you're willing to put your blood, soul, and tears, then fine. But if not, then don't do it. The other thing I'll say about expectation versus reality will be this, and this is the one thing I found really disheartening, but I've had to crack on when it comes to the bar, is I expected cases to have that eureka moment, for there to be this kind of court hearing and, you argue your case and actually because of your advocacy, you've got it over the line. Nah, utter BS. The vast majority of cases, you know what's going to happen based on the papers. You know what's going to likely happen based on the papers. You can give a very good indication as to the merits of a case. That's the reality of the bar. Your papers come through. It's now come to a stage where it's last resort when it's come to court. Shit's hit the fan. All the background stuff has happened. It's last moments, last chances, particularly in immigration. We know what the merits are, probably most of the time. It is quite rare to get those cases to say, actually, this is going to balance on something. And I can, 90% of the time, I think most immigration barristers would agree with this, 90% of the time, I can tell my clients if they're going to win or lose based on our judge, not based on the facts or merits of my case. But actually, I can say to somebody, actually, in front of this judge, no matter how good your case is, you will lose. I guarantee you, you will lose. And I know we're going to lose. There's other judges who, and I can say, look at them and be like, this is a 50-50 case. You've got a fair judge. We'll see what happens. And that for me was the most disheartening part of the bar. That's a reality. But you can't let it get you down. And exactly what Chelvan said, it's getting those messages or knowing that you've made the difference in a person's life, that actually now for the first time ever, this person can go to bed without crying their eyes out, being worried that they're about to be deported or sent back to their persecutors. And that's a wonderful feeling.
Thank you so much. Just a bit conscious of time. Chelvan, did you want to add anything to that at all?
Well, I think I'm in a different position than Rehana and Baldip, because I recognize that very much as my life timetable about 4 or 5 years ago. And one thing my first ex supervisor told me is make sure you prioritize your private life, because otherwise the workload can consume. And I do Sunday, what's called colloquially on Twitter, Sunday homework club for barristers. You know, I work on Sundays, but I'm very fortunate that my expectations of reality now at the bar are very much alive. You know, I've got cases up currently before the European Court of Human Rights, just been communicated to the UK. I've got a case in the Supreme Court. I'm doing test cases. I'm doing direct access cases where I get clients going to me, and I'm at that stage where, you know, I'm working in teams. I mean, the great thing at 33 Bedford Row is that we've got an amazing international human rights and civil liberties team. So I'm doing a lot of international rights work with clients outside the UK and inside the UK. So, you know, my expectation and reality are exactly on the same level, because it is about living my dream. You know, there are two types of barristers. There's a first instance barrister. You know, Rehana was explaining about, you know, going there, winning the case in the first instance, where I'm that other type of barrister called the appellate barrister, who will look at that case the first instance and say, I want to run that point in the Court of Appeal. And that's a problem with my clients, because they end up having me, and I think that's a really interesting point I want to run in the Court of Appeal. It doesn't stop me winning the case in the first instance, but it's about looking and developing and changing the law. So for me, my expectations and reality, as I said at the beginning of the session, I am living my dream. So come to the bar, fulfill your dreams, and make change.
Thank you so much. I'll just pass it back to Sarah, because obviously we're a bit over time here. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask a question, but I think I'll ask privately on email or something. As long as we've covered all the questions that we had from the attendees, so that's wonderful. I am conscious of the time, so I just want to hear from the panelists their closing speeches, and we'll end it from there, please. Chelvan, please.
Well, I think you've heard a lot of speeches from me tonight already, so I will move to my, but you know, as I say, the best profession in the world, so come and join us.
Thank you. Baldip?
Never the same day twice. You are your own boss. It's amazing. And really, the sky is your limit. You know, amazing profession.
Wonderful. Thank you, Baldip. And Rehana?
I've written 2 top tips that I wanted to give. One is read Counsel magazine, because it is the most topical collection, and including articles from barristers about what's going on. So that'll give you a good indication of what might be asked in an interview. And my second top tip that I forgot to give was when doing the advocacy exercise in interview, we have 20 minutes. Do not spend 5 minutes or 2 minutes of your interview time recanting the facts. We know the facts, we wrote the question. You don't need to tell it to us. Just say it's assumed that the panel know the facts, or the whatever panel or whichever you're appearing in front of, and then say, moving on to my submissions. Save yourself the time, give yourself more time to demonstrate your abilities, because that's what we're actually interested in. So those are my top tips, my closing remarks.
Fantastic. Thank you. Chili, would you like to say something?
Just thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to our panelists for all the helpful advice that you've given us. And I just wanted to tell all the attendees to leave us feedback on social media and connect with us on LinkedIn. That's all.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Benedict, please.
Thank you everyone for staying behind these last 5 minutes. Really appreciate you guys for your time. Barristers, thank you guys as well for taking your time out to be here this whole night, but also obviously staying behind as well. I've learned a lot. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. And from me, thank you so much for the attendees, and a special thank you to the panelists for being so helpful and for promoting the event as well. Again, same as Benedict, I've learned so much. I've made so much notes. Make sure for the attendees you follow all our barristers. They are all over Twitter. They are on LinkedIn, and Baldip is also on Instagram. So make sure you follow them and you bombard them with the messages. So yeah, it has been fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Have a good night for all, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you guys. Thank you.